welcome to the radio short course, Boston Media House, with myself, Chris Jordan, who will be your lecturer for the next, I think, 12 lessons or so. As I say, I think I should know. I did put them together myself. I think it's 12 lessons. I know it's 2 lessons. No, it's not. It's 12 lessons. Okay. All right. So we are going to be looking at a vast amount and a variance of content when it comes to radio production and radio presenting as well, from just kind of the semantics and the structures, which we're going to look at today in lesson 1 of how the radio landscape is formed and formulated together, all the way down to podcasts and being able to put one together, and what is it that makes podcasts so great, etc., as well as your demo. We'll also look at news, sports, in between, content creation itself, and a whole lot more. So without having to really delay this any longer, I'm going to get into Unit 1, Lesson 1. Please stay, keep track. So as you're watching the video, then make sure that the slides are there with you. And also, if there are any snap exercises, don't forget to do it for yourself so that you can make sure that you are also practicing and making, grasping the concepts that we are going through at the end of each unit itself. So, for example, let's say this unit is made up of 3 lessons. At the end of the unit itself, so after lesson 3, there will be an exercise that you have to complete. And then again, just kind of cross reference and check that with probably myself at the end of the day. There'll be someone that does check that in. Okay, so this is going to be our introduction lesson or introductory lesson. It is again introducing you to the radio landscape. I won't carry on too much as to why radio is fantastic. I'm going to carry on about that throughout the different lessons. So, and you are here because you do have a passion for it. You do have something that's been drawing you to find out a little bit more whether or not you are matched for this industry, and you can maybe be our next new, I say not influencer, oh my word, no, just our radio professional, and just allowing us to be that piece of communication towards you. I say you, the conduit of information. That's what a presenter's job is. Conduit of information between the people and what they have to say, as well as the rest of the world and what's happening over there. Okay, so welcome to the radio landscape. So in 2023, which we are currently recording this at, we have multiple dominating media platforms, and again, just say media suppliers, but platforms is probably more accurate. When I do say that, we have print, we have our digital print, we have television, and within television we have our streaming services, our Netflix, our Showmax, our Disney Pluses, whatever it may be. We have radio, okay, as its own. I really class it as its own solitary platform on its own, and put that aside from podcasting itself. With that, we also have our digital platforms, so Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, YouTube, and just a whole lot more. If you had to go Google and actually search how many different, for example, digital platforms are on you, or should I say are currently active, you'd be able to see an infograph, which I have not included just because it's kind of ridiculous in the way that there is just an ominous amount of digital platforms and access to these just ways of communication that are currently active. Not just our 6 or 7 our big 7, as I've just described there. Okay, so radio is aggressively effective, and please, I'm going to read off the slides now and again and face the camera and speak to you, right? But I want to just look at some of these stats. Mostly in this lecture, there'll be quite a lot of stats that we have to look at. So once again, it's a real medium. In real time, real people. So we're looking at presenters that are talking about things, or concepts, conversations, whatever it may be, right now. It is not something that is pre-produced and then put out at a later date so that the timestamp is actually varied. And now talking directly to real people, right? So that is you, for example, if you've been a listener to radio, which you obviously have. You genuinely, even if you lived under a rock, you'd listen to radio at some point in your life. All of us do and have listened to the media at some point, but we know also exactly about the direct connection. Let's look at some of the obvious stats that are and surround radio itself, right? It is very aggressive in the sense that it is aggressively intimate, and the way in which we contact and communicate and connect with listeners themselves, okay? So it is a real medium with real people that are talking to real people in real time, right? And that kind of sums up why it is so special and why it is set apart from the different mediums that we do have a choice in, let's say, buying into, or let's say, putting a little bit of a place or a space within our lifestyle, because it does stand out in that way. And this is why radio, people say always radio is dead or radio is going to die. It's not going to. I can somehow even tell you right now, a bit of a Nostradamus feel here, and I can look into the very, 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 very far future, telling that radio is not going to die. Not because I just love it and because I'm a practitioner itself, but because it does serve something completely different to any of the other platforms that we do have access to. Okay, it is extensive in terms of its reach here in South Africa, at 92% reach within our population. So you've got to think of radio as being an emergency medium at the end of the day. So this is why, if you look at community stations that are surrounding the station, I think we're about 296 community stations that are active at the moment, and about 31 commercial stations, 31 to 33, I think. But everyone in this country, so let's say I'm going to use a pandemic or the twister. There was a twister that just hit Durban, and I love twisters. I don't have to get into that and my relationship with twisters. The point is that so let's say in Durban, everyone that lives in the KZN area where there was strong winds and there was like kind of destructive and catastrophic weather, they would have to be notified of that information through the radio medium, because various people in KZN speak different languages. So there must be a radio station that speaks the language of every single person in KZN, for example, to tell them where they're going to go, where the police are on their way to come and get them out of their homes, put them somewhere that's a bit more protected. They've got to be able to understand and get that information, just like we did in the pandemic. Everybody. So here in South Africa, we have Jewish stations, we have Greek stations, we have Afrikaans stations, we have every single, so isiZulu, Sesotho, as you know, Tonga, whatever it may be. Right, we have a station for every single language, for every single person that does live in South Africa. So they can also not only get that emergency news, but also be able to tune into a station and enjoy information that is being transmitted, I would say, from one space to another. Here in South Africa. Okay, all right, I think you get the gist of it as well, but 92% of people do have access and do listen to the radio, I was going to say to the radio itself here in South Africa. It is massively covered with relevant topics. That's the thing. That's what makes great radio. And we'll talk about great radio a little bit later in this particular lesson as well. Great radio is radio that lands, right? So we're talking about a station with presenters and shows that speak about stuff that matters to that listener's life. Okay, so much so that we become dependent in terms of its I would say, like the justification, the viability, is that right? No, reliability, it being viable itself as well, as a trustworthy medium. So what presenters say and do, and what the news is broadcast with even financial indicators. So, for example, what the rand is going for compared to the dollar, etc., what the petrol prices are. These are all supposed to be facts, because people depend on radio in terms of an honest medium to tell them the truth. It is not tabloid, it is not sensationalized, and we don't do that type of thing. Okay, with over 300 stations, as I said, countrywide, there is a station for every sect, culture, and people everywhere. So we're going to get into different different organizations that form the I would say the structure, a bit of the regulations, the legal regulations as well, that you should know of, that make up these areas of our medium. Okay, the first one I'm going to start off is with ICASA. So ICASA is the Independent Communications Authority of South Africa. I'm looking at this. Sometimes I'm not that great with our abbreviations, yeah, but I do very well know what ICASA does, right? So ICASA is the organization that licenses radio stations to go on air, to be on air, and then gives them the frequency. Right now, we still work with AM and FM, and not DAB plus, like most countries actually around Europe, Australia, and America. Right, we're still stuck on AM and FM, which is not a bad thing. AM not so much, but we'll get into that conversation a little bit later. The point is that ICASA will now develop a license. They don't just develop a license willy-nilly. There has to be a need for a particular radio station by people here in South Africa for them to create this license, obviously award it to someone. So there'll be different tenders that are submitted to ICASA by different people, and then it will award the license to the most, obviously, I wouldn't say valiant person, but yeah, that's pretty much the closest description I can say right now. That one more suitable. They have the capital start station. They've put the best description, or should I say documentation and proposal together, and they license this particular entity itself, and then we start a radio station. So the thing is, we have again a limited here in South Africa where we are saturated as an industry, right? So by that I mean we have too little commercial radio stations. For example, we have plenty community stations, as I said, nearly 300 there, but in terms of commercial, we are saturated with 31, like I say, 31 stations around the whole country. That's insane. If you compare it to, I think, like just New York City, which I worked in briefly. I was representing South Africa on their community station, which was called SARFM. It was down in Harlem, which would feature different artists in Africa, different presenters, and that particular, just in terms of, I just want to give you some capacity. Just that one community station in Harlem, which is just, it's a sub part, or I would say a sub environment on its own. In New York City itself, had up to something like 450,000 listeners, which is insane, because if we look at, let's say, numbers here, and we look at, let's say, commercial stations that are averaging around about 650,000 to, let's say about two, if we're going to factor, let's say, Ukhozi and, let's say, Metro FM, between 2 and 3 million. That's a crazy amount in comparison. When I say New York itself has up over 100 different commercial stations, that is insane to say. There's so many people, yes, definitely in New York and New York State and New York City itself. And so then they obviously will find enough stations to serve different parts of the community. Like I said, SARFM, specifically for Harlem. But for us here, we don't really have a lot of competition, and that's not really good, because stations tend to monopolize, kind of a certain sector, a certain Gauteng province. So if you look up here in Gauteng, where we have the most amount of radio stations, right? So commercial stations, we have Power FM, we got Kai FM, we got I've got 947, we've got Jacaranda, we have Metro and 5, which are they are national, but they still factor in here as well. And who am I forgetting? There's someone else I'm forgetting here. But it'll come to me now in just a second. My point is that we have so many here, but in comparison to, let's say, the Free State, which literally only has OFM as a commercial station, right? We don't want to talk about the PBS, so the public broadcast services, like our Ukhosis, like our Umhlobo Wenene stations. So this is on a different thing. I'll get to that in just a moment. But we look at, let's say, the Free State, and look at OFM, and they completely rule. They have no competition at all. If we put 5 FM or Metro FM, you'll see that if we read some of the stats that come from the BRC itself, people will always settle for a regional station first, then a national station, because the regional is obviously more personalized. Okay, I'm kind of getting off point, but not really. The thing is, we need a lot, like for example, OFM needs a station to be legalized and licensed in the same area in the Free State, so that there is competitive, like healthy competition between the two stations, and people also have the choice, right? We have rates that can go down and they become competitive as well in terms of like how we sell advertisements to clients or whatever it may be. And also, again, like in media, we need to understand that there are biased opinions and biased sectors within. If you look at, let's say, CNN versus Fox News, where they are sitting on different sides of the spectrum, and being able to give you a certain point of view in which they obviously process and present the news compared to one another. You need that type of thing so that you can make the choice of watching all the news that is out there from different perspectives. That's right? And then saying, I have got all the information that I need and I can decide further on where I go. So back to ICASA and why it's important for them to constantly give a little more and a little more. If we look at, they had a bit of the growth spurt in terms of the commercial stations, where ICASA decided to start with Power FM as a brand new station up here in Gauteng. They moved around the country and started introducing new stations, like for example Smile in Cape Town. We also had like Kakasi FM is a new one as well, and so that there again would be a little bit more competition and a little bit more health in terms of like the radio industry itself. Okay. Anyway, so they monitor the industry, plan, control, and manage frequency spectrums, and they protect customers from unfair business practices. And so I want to already ask you a question, something that you can think about. Do you think South Africa has the correct amount of stations to service the country's needs? I know that I've had my opinion and I've shared it with you, but do you feel that we have enough stations? Think of yourself in a situation of how many stations you rotate around. So, for example, and here's the answer actually, you will choose up to 3 stations maximum actually, because you don't have the capacity as South African to tolerate even more than that, right? And you will rotate between the 3 only if the one, your main, if the main selection, so let's say, for example, right now, I listen to Kakasi FM. Even though I am in Gauteng, I really, really, really enjoy Kakasi FM because it's fresh, and they are fresh, and the presenters are fresh, and it's so great to listen to some great radio, right? So, okay, let's say Kakasi FM does something that I don't quite like. So, for example, I find consistently that, let's say, there's some boring content, the presenters maybe have offended me in some other kind of way. I will then switch to my second choice. My second choice currently would probably be maybe Kaya, maybe Jacaranda, maybe 947. I don't really know. And my third choice is Tuks FM because I come from Tuks FM, and so as an alumni, like I will just choose Tuks FM beyond any other station and defend them to death, right? My thing is that, okay, I can only be well, I'm going to use the word pissed off, right, okay? I can only be angry at, let's say, C.A.S for so long, so that I will rotate my stations up to a 6-month period. I'll be back on C.A.S. That's not really long, and that's not a lot of choice at the end of the day. And so we need more stations at the end of the day. You tell me your own opinion. Let's keep going because it's a long lesson, right? Okay, so the NAB, right? So the NAB is the National Association of Broadcasters. It is not I would say it's not a formal like committee or entity in the sense that it doesn't necessarily help, it doesn't make the decisions on, for example, let's say something as heavy or something as again, formal, like a license itself. It's made up of like some media practitioners, station managers, people from different sectors of the different industries as well. And it is actually there to protect, in a way, the broadcasting industry, right? So it is a non-profit. That's how we know that it is not something like the BCCSA, which I'm going to explain in just a moment, or like ICASA, for example, and helps the broadcasting industry in regulating and promoting itself. It's grounded in the principles of democracy, diversity, freedom of expression. Members also include, again, as I say, people from the commercial sector. What I have done, and you'll see that in many of the lessons, please, there's additional material that you must go have a look at. It's very lengthy. I made sure that this course is very rich so that you do get a little bit more than just slides and a conversation from me to you. So you can go and have a look at, let's say, this little link here that's at nab.org and go and have a look at the broadcasting industry segment of what it is and what they are all about. And in addition to the NAB material that I have added as additional material there. Okay. All right. So let us go to the BCCSA. I'm sure you have heard about them because we're quite, and it's okay. I mean, we're quite public about what happens at the BCCSA, which is a Broadcast Complaints Commission of South Africa, right? So whenever okay, so this is open to the public. The public will now listen to a station. If, let's say, a broadcaster or a station does something wrong in their eyes, they will then submit a complaint, and then the BCCSA will now then have a bit of an adjudication. You understand? They will decide whether or not the station has been found guilty of this action that they have been, accused of, and then they will pay a fine, a massive fine. So I remember this particular moment where I learned the very big kind of like ripple effect of you as a presenter against the BCCSA. And this was very early on. I learned a lesson while I was at Tux in I think it was my second year of doing radio in my life. And I ran my mouth, which is something that I still do right now. But I've got what my boss said to me back then. He said, like, a radio presenter needs to have 2 filters here in front of his or her mouth, so that you can, when you talk, the one filter will work, and then you need to reapply another filter so that you can understand that a lot of things that you say just off the cuff, or when you are in the moment and you're just talking away there, or you want to go and try and impress someone or try to be cool or whatever it may be, like, you're going to offend people. They're going to complain. And at the end of the day, so that's exactly what I did. I thought I was being clever, and I thought I was being cool, and I was being like pseudo arrogant and stuff like that. And I got a complaint against me. Then he said to me, okay. So back then my name was Papa G, which was very cool, by the way. But okay, anyway. So okay. So he said to me, he actually called me Krik. Never called me by my name. Rian Van Heerden was my station manager. Anyway, so I said, Krik, listen, like, give me one reason why I should go and defend you. And I thought, yeah, like, I've only been here like maybe 2 years. He says, He says, even if you were the best jock, which at that point you were not, Chris, all right? He said, like, even if you're the best jock, why must I go in and I'll pay 60,000 Rand fine if they find you guilty, and I will go and defend you? Why must I go and do that? Why? Because you can't follow rules. Because you think you're holier than thou. You're bigger than the station. You're bigger than the listener. You're bigger than the brand. And I genuinely had no answer, because there isn't an answer. It doesn't matter how big you are in this industry. The station comes first. The brand comes first. I'm saying beyond you, but the listener comes beyond that as well. So I just said to him, I said to him, please don't fire me. Please go and defend me. I swear. Please, no. Like, I won't do that again. And I didn't, because I learned a very, very quick lesson on how I could lose the job that I was and am still so passionate about, just because I just couldn't hold my tongue. I just wasn't clever about it. Do you understand? So yes, we have many situations where every single radio station, every single DJ does have to speak their mind, and they can speak quite candidly as well. But you must know that you need to be clever about, again, another bit of analogy, just so you can learn. Rian also said to us while he was training us, like, if you put a frog into a boiling pot, the frog is going to jump out, right, immediately. But if you put a frog into like a pot, cold water, it's going to sit there, and if you slowly boil it, you're going to boil that frog. What does this mean? It means that while you are trying to make quite a controversial point, or get to the point in terms of what you want to say or what you want to do on your show and what you want to do on radio, bring in the listener and allow them to want to hear the controversial parts, to want to hear you break the boundaries, so that they don't jump out the pot. You just cook them alive, and they love it. Right, so this brings us back to the BCCSA. All right, so what's going to happen, you can go read through the semantics about how the BCCSA also watches for online content now, and does also monitor places like Netflix, DSTV, Box Office, Showmax, social media, etc. I want to kind of break, and I added this PDF file, which I got as one of the complaints. Again, it is publicly available. You can go see it. Where East Coast Radio, it was filed against East Coast Radio. It's quite lengthy, so I'm not going to go through the whole thing. But it was against Carol Afori, and we love Carol. And this particular listener had a problem with what Carol had said around. So I'm going to read a little bit of the complaint here. So I wish to lodge a formal complaint of false and misleading comments by East Coast Radio and its Carol Afori on her show. I called the station 4 times to request that the matter be addressed, but I was placed on hold for 10 minutes and no one called me back. All right. On the show, when talking about what's trending, the presenters noted that C.A.S had requested solar installers provide details. Details of the person installing solar panels, so that C.A.S can investigate the people for undisclosed tax. This is false and misleading, and in my opinion is treasonous, as this is an attempt to undermine the need of the country to encourage citizens to install solar. The reason why installers have to provide information to C.A.S is to allow the taxpayer to claim the 15,000 Rand rebate announced in the State of the Nation and the budget speech, and to try to undermine that is false and misleading and treasonous once again. You can understand why this person was upset. Was she found guilty? So the broadcaster responds as follows. So ECR, East Coast Radio, said, just for some context, After reviewing the audio personally, and this is obviously the station manager, program manager, I can say that it clearly stated that it is merely a proposal. So that the audio said it is proposed. So it was only a suggestion, NAB. So I'm not sure if it helps anyway, what says there, right? Obviously the response was as follows: I have registered to the audio. There is no mention to the business tech article, which is now put forward and the basis of the audio as the basis of the audio, which is fair, right? Okay. In event, I think that the American courts are now dealing with the issue of when a news station reports on a falsehood, which is good. Okay, I'm saying not to report on falsehood. That they're calling them out is a good thing, right? Okay, and obviously presents it as the truth. When you listen to something on radio, and you believe it to be the truth, because as I said earlier, like this is about. Like this medium is about honesty, truth, and facts. Okay, so we do have opinion. Opinion is based on facts. At the end of the day, I know you're dying to know what actually happened. Okay, so the evaluation at the end of the day. So I've listened to the broadcast. It comprised an insert in the Carol Forey show, blah, 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 right? Okay. It does not appear to be a call-in program on its homepage, blah, blah, blah. The following is the gist of what has happened. So it will say it, the presenter will say it, and obviously it will revise what the complainant had said about it. Let's get to the juicy parts. So the broadcaster had argued obviously against it, showed the business tech thing, as I said, and the news reported that C.A.S issued a draft notice. Once again, let me just move right down. In the result, the complaint is upheld and the broadcaster is urged to be more circumspect in the future. As sanction, a reprimand will suffice. In other words, they were not fined, but they gave him a good slap on the hand, I suppose. I was going to say on the shoulder, that's a bit too friendly. But this is a warning. The warnings are even bad, because the warning says next time you're going to come and do something that's even close to this, we will immediately not even investigate further. We'll just fine you. And if you're fined to a certain extent, they can also suspend your license, which is, I mean, you'll be off air immediately, and probably every broadcaster's complete nightmare. Okay. All right. So having that said, let's move on. Now, you know the entities. Okay. I'm going to go into the different aspects of what makes the radio landscape in terms of like the different types of stations. Okay. One, we have public radio, so the SABC. In terms of history, the SABC was always here, right? The SABC owned everything. They had all the stations, even what we know today to be privatized stations. So things like 947, Jacaranda, East Coast, etc. So what's under Kakiso and under Prime Media, right? It all belonged to the SABC, and that's cool, because at a certain point the SABC said we need to split things up, like make the privatized stations, have the PBS stations on one side as well, the public broadcast services and stations, so that there can be healthy competition. Because if it's all at the SABC, it's not correct in terms of business, like good business management and so on, and ethics and whatever it may be, right? As media, as I said before, media has to be enough, like it needs to expose enough of different points of view. For example, like I say, Kaya is very, very hard on, like, let's say, not exposing the SABC, but the SABC will make certain statements in the news, whatever it may be, whatever it is, and and Kaya FM specifically will be right wingers to that, so that the listener will be able to again have a choice on understanding, and it is not a communist country that we live in, but rather a democratic one, right? Okay, anyway, so our public radio is made up of people like 5FM and Metro FM, right? As well as Good Hope, funny enough. Good Hope down in the Cape is also considered part of our SABC public broadcasters, okay? So, but they are commercial, And so you can go and have a look about that. Each one of these stations have formats. So for example, if we look now, the format is then defined by the license that is given to them as well. And so the thing is that, let's say 5FM should be, at this point, my guess is quite accurate, which normally is, at this point it should be an urban youth contemporary hit radio station, you understand? So and Metro would be considered a jazz, an adult contemporary jazz station, right? You're going to say, but jazz is all with the saxophone and stuff. It really isn't. Like, even I thought that many years ago, because it's kind of what it's introduced to you in commercial media. But jazz is very broad in terms of like, covering like R&B and soft, like soft R&B, I would say, soft urban, that type of stuff. Very nice. I love that. Love Metro. We all love Metro. Who doesn't, right? Okay. All right. Do we get commercial radio? Right. So commercial radio, and again, I'm not going to go through the slides. A lot of information there, but the commercial radio, as I explained, two really big conglomerates own the commercial space, which is Prime Media and ICASA, right? Then we have hybrids in between, like that will own, for example, like YFM, and will own, let's say, Kaya FM. For example, like in Kaya, Prime Media and ICASA have hands in Kaya, but it is predominantly owned by a private sector on its own. Irregardless of this, privatized stations are, like I say, under Prime Media, we have 567 Cape Talk, we have KFM, we have 947, and we have 702 that is sitting under their bouquet, should I say, right? Whereas in ICASA will have our OFMs, they will have, I go from ECR, so East Coast Radio, they have Jacaranda there as well, and a couple more. I'm not lost for thought here. There's a couple more that's under the bouquet. The point is that like these are constantly competing against one another. So there was a certain point where like 947 tried to reach out to a Pretoria audience where Jacaranda dominates, and Jacaranda did the same thing, trying to reach out to a Joburg audience, which both of them failed at this, because then, like Joburg is 947 is their key station. Like it's the one station that marks off as Joburg's number one, or whatever it has, always will be. And Jacaranda is like purely and proudly Pretoria. So we don't have direct competition, but if people are commuting, for example, from, like, let's say Pretoria to Joburg, we have a bit of an issue here. We do have a bit of a choice, right? And we'd like to know a little bit more as to what choices we can make. I'm saying, like, when we are looking at let's say 702 and Power, right? So 702 and Power are in the same region, so they're in Gauteng, and they are aggressive competitors. 702's are, like I say, obviously winning. They've been around longer. Power FM is a little bit messier at this moment. It doesn't really matter. It's still competition, and so they need to be able to be aware of one another in every step, every kind of way. You understand, right? Okay, so that's the commercial radio space. Look at our community stations, right? So there's a couple of things that I've written here. There's this great site by Franz Kruger, who's actually working at Wits University. He's been there for quite a long time. Runs the Wits Radio Academy, I think, right? And I put a link there to let's say the website itself. You must go and have a look. It's really great. And then I've also added a bit of a PDF so you can understand that also further. But community radio is accumulatively, all together, they dominate the space. So they are much bigger than all the cumulative of whatever it is in terms of like our commercial stations. And that makes a lot of sense. 296 stations, we add it all together. Obviously, it's going to be a much larger number. But the thing is that our community stations live from hand to mouth. So they are always, quote unquote, poor. Right. They are funded by the government to a certain extent, but for them to actually keep their licenses, right, they have to bring in a certain amount of money, right, and have to obviously retain a certain amount of listeners. But every fiscal year, every year to year, the station manager will then submit, let's say, a report, okay, with obviously all the supporting documentation in it as well, to allow them to keep their license and moving forward. A couple of years back, just before actually COVID, there were, the ICASA had cancelled stations. They I think closed down around about, I think it was 9 stations. They're predominantly in the Western Cape, which were no longer relevant to a new society, so our new era, and there were stations with formats that were old. I say old hat, okay, and also and they're allowed to do that. So even if they were, let's say the stations were meeting their quota or whatever it is, they still closed them down because they needed to assign, and they wanted to assign those licenses and that frequency to a new station that could be and was or is going to be relevant to our radio landscape. Right. Okay. Community stations are the ones that normally close down first. Okay. Okay, so just some of the notes here, right? So if radio exists to serve its community, then what content does that mean? Do we need to actually choose and deliver, especially when it's at a community level? The community radio station, just so that you can understand the role of its purpose. If, let's say, your dog or your cat goes missing, you are allowed to go to the station or phone the station and say, please make an announcement that my dog, he's named this, he's a border collie, I don't know anything about dogs, please announce that if anyone sees that, please to get in contact with me at 072 whatever. So even though if this is not the most riveting radio content that someone can put on their show, they have to do it because that is their servitude and it's part of their license agreement to serve their community in every way, shape or form. So for example, like I say, public announcements are like that, are very common as well, but you won't hear much of them because the listeners actually don't know that they have that option. If they did, they would go and they use that kind of service a little bit more I say aggressively once again. Okay, so let's have a look at some of the pointers there that I'm going to elaborate on. So firstly, radio as a medium means that it needs to entertain, educate, and inform its audience. I'm going to use that a lot, and you're going to see that a lot as well. In everything a local station broadcasts, it needs to uphold these principles all the time. So again, inform, educate, or entertain. Or it can be and or, right? So we can inform and educate and entertain at the same time, right? If you're not doing any of these, you're not doing good radio. You're not doing radio and like period, blank, finish. What are you doing at the end of the day, right? And this applies not only to obviously our local station, this applies to radio as a whole. Okay, so and so if we read just a couple more of the notes there, community stations are more able to fill the communication gap because they are hands-on as it is. Like stations, radio stations in general, are there to fill a communication gap between people, between thoughts, processes, services, whatever it may be. But at a community level, it is like we touch, feel, and hear and see them all the time. I'm saying that of our listeners. You can go and have a look at more of the details there about obviously the sectors we break into: religious programming. We have like for example, just like health. There's health, or there's I think the religious one is quite a lot. I say quite broad. Music, language, etc. It doesn't matter. There'll be a separation of. Okay. So I've mentioned the word format, and I want you to understand what a format is. So there's Again, so in the 1930s, right, there was, in the 1920s we had World War One. In the 1930s we had this growth spurt around radio. There was only obviously radio communication back in World War One. You can imagine why it was super important for people to know what was going on and why radio was there literally only to report what was happening. There wasn't really like this whole thing of like having call outs and all this type of stuff, right? But after World War One, there was this really dependent need on the importance of the service itself. And so radio started to grow in different aspects of till World War II hit in the late 1930s, I think, right, okay? And World War II was unlike World War One. I mean, World War II was, I think, it was 4 or 5 years or so, all right? So this was enough time for the infrastructure of different countries to have to get on with life, do you understand, right? So while the men were at war, like whoever was left behind needed the comfort of a radio station and the presenter 24 hours a day, quote unquote. Let me just say 24 hours a day, right? Because we needed to know what was happening to our men, like out in, obviously the Central Europe, where, Germany was making its rounds, and then only later the US joined, etc. And we know that obviously the East, etc., right? Okay. What we didn't know, I'm saying is radio, was that television was being developed at that very same point. I think in 1937 or something like that it started. And it involved various scientists from various countries, including Germany. They weren't all bad guys. It was just really one horrible bad guy, right? Who then released television to the first world states, I would say countries of the world, right after World War II. Okay. This was obviously, like, radio was dead immediately, because now you used to have families that would sit around a radio set, and that would be what they'd do after dinner time, So they'd sit there, they would have famous actors like Elizabeth Hurley, right? No, Elizabeth Hurley. Am I doing the Liz? Is it? Who is it? Man, Elizabeth something, the one that won all those awards. She was Cleopatra. Oh, damn it. Okay, don't worry. Okay, so what they would do is then sit around like a radio set, and obviously the more, I was saying, the more rich communities had these massive, beautiful sets that would, like have in their dining room or whatever it was, and they have these wonderful picturesque pictures. You must go and see it on the net how wonderful these. It's this nice, like clean family living, and they would listen to massive actors and actresses that won Academy Awards, and they would be doing radio dramas, their live radio dramas. It did everything. Radio did everything, right? That TV now added the visual aspect too. So what's better, listening to an Oscar winner or watching them, at the end of the day? And when Technicolor came in, that was just a soul destroyer for radio. But radio already had to start making a plan back then. And they decided on the concept of formats, okay? So as you see on the slide, the formats are how we started to split. And there are so many formats in this world. We're only covering like a tenth of the tenth of whatever exists out there, right? So the format now will allow or indicate to a listener, say, okay, cool, I like this type of music, I like this type of conversation, I am considered this, I'm saying, like, I'm in this particular age bracket, I earn this amount of money, this is what I spend it on, I'm quite into, let's say, news or talk radio, whatever it is, formats. Okay, here's a couple. So for example, like CHR, Contemporary Hit Radio, the only contemporary hit radio station in I'm going to say not South Africa, that's not true, but in Gauteng is 947, right? That is what their license says to them. You are contemporary hit radio. Contemporary hit radio, it's also referred to basically like the top 40 or pop. In other words, like you can only play songs that are hits. So in other words, not hits by other stations. This confused me in the beginning. I was like, that doesn't really make sense. So you always are going to be late on music. No. Like the world breaks music. So we'll look at, let's say, you look at what songs from international artists for now, for example. Let's say Rihanna's hitting the top of the Billboard Hot 100. We will definitely now start playing her brand new song immediately afterwards it's released, and it's gone up there. So that is what contemporary hit radio is about. You notice obviously that our programming in general across stations is 65% local now in terms of music and 35% international. How do we decide on that? Because I mean local itself needs to be proven in some other way. Again, we'll be looking at one another, different charts, different social media standing or effects or influence or whatever it is, like popularity in clubs and pubs, in bars, whatever it may be, and concerts or whatever it may be that people are going to, and we'll grab these things. On Spotify, there are so many Mzansi charts that are also available that we can go and we can easily decide who and what it is that we want to play from local content. Anyway, let me not completely veer off. Okay, adult contemporary stations. So I said, so even contemporary hit radio, the example used to be 5. I mean, 5 used to be contemporary hit radio as well, but it's more become our 947s. You'll see the 947 is listed under Hot AC as well, which again is not confusing. Please, I'm not trying to confuse you. They move slightly from format to format over the years, and ICASA allows it because they're not really breaking a lot of the rules by completely changing their formats completely. Okay, all right, anyway. So adult contemporary, Jacaranda ECR, so East Coast Radio, Hot AC, so Hot Adult Contemporary, again, kind of the charty stuff, a little bit more for the adults. That's a bit of an old 947 that we used to know. So right now they're targeting a much younger audience. You can see that through the presenters that they've chosen as well, the shows that they're obviously trying to create, and then obviously again the music that is there. Okay, we have urban contemporary, for example, like YFM. We have urban adult contemporary, so Metro FM and Kaya FM, and we have new stations like, for example, SAFM, 702, Power, and so on and so forth.